Have you heard of World War II? Hi kids, this is Auntie Mila, and our story is Dieter and the War. Our verse is Psalm 91. That's my favorite chapter in the Bible, Psalm 91. And verse 3 says, He will deliver you from every trap. Yes, God will deliver us. There was a big noise in the street. Someone was shouting and yelling. And Mother said to Dieter, run out and see what he's saying. It was a soldier, and he was walking down the street shouting. Dieter was 13 years old, and he lived in Hainau, Germany. And the year was 1945 in the spring. And so Dieter ran out to the street and he listened, and a soldier was walking down the street yelling. And he was saying, get out, leave right now, the Russians are coming. You've got to leave. And he went back and he told his mom, he says, the soldier said the Russians are coming and that we're supposed to leave. And his mom thought, oh no, I thought we were winning the war. I don't know what to do. Should we stay or should we go? And Dieter said, no, Mom, we need to go. And so Mother said, yes, you're probably right. She says, run to the basement and get our big suitcase down there. It's under the stairs. And Dieter said, okay. So he ran downstairs and he came back with a big suitcase. And Mom put it on the bed and she started packing their good clothes. And she even packed Daddy's good suit. Daddy wasn't home. He was in the war. He had been drafted and he was off fighting in the German army during World War II. And Mommy started packing up the suitcases. And then she says, go and get those two other little suitcases, Dieter, in the basement. We need those. So he ran and he got those two other little suitcases. And so they packed their clothes that they needed, just what they needed in these two little suitcases. And then she said, well, we probably should leave the big suitcase because it's really big with all of our good clothes. But I don't want the Russians to get them. But I don't know what else to do. And so she packed the two little suitcases. And then she was in the kitchen. She said, Dieter, bring me your backpack. So he brought his backpack and she packed with food. Good black German bread and some apples and some other things. She was packing in his case. And she packed food in her bag. And then she looked out the window and she said, oh, there's my neighbor. She is so sweet. She's been such a good neighbor. Dieter, I want to go and tell her goodbye. And so she walked out the back door to go and talk to the neighbor. And Dieter said, I want to know what's happening. He went up the stairs and then he climbed up this attic. There was a trap door in the ceiling. And he opened it and he could climb out on the roof. Because there was the chimney and there was a little walkway around the chimney for the chimney sweep that would come every month and clean the chimney, if it needed it or not. And so he climbed up and he was walking around there and he looked and he saw fighting. He saw 3 airplanes flying over, German airplanes, and they were bombing and the tanks were fighting back. He could see the fighting. He thought, oh my, there is fighting. Oh, we better go. And he came back down. And by this time, Mom said, let's go. And he said, are we going to go on the train or are we going to take our bicycles? She says, we're going to take our bicycles. You ride Daddy's bike and I'll ride mine. And so she took their little suitcases. They left their big suitcase. They took their little suitcases and strapped it on the back of the bicycle and they tied it on Mom's bike and then they tied the other little suitcase onto Daddy's bike that Dieter was going to drive. And then they had their backpack. Dieter had his backpack on and Mom had her case. And then she looked back at the house and she went and Dieter said, don't forget the important papers, Mom. And she went and got the envelope of very important papers, the deed to the house, birth certificates, very important papers, and she put them in her purse. And she says, no, I can't forget to take these. And off they went, started pedaling through town. And other people were leaving. They were just all trying to flee before the Russians. The Russians were just coming in and taking over Germany. And as they were pedaling along, Dieter said, I wonder why we have to flee. Germany is the greatest nation and we're going to win the war, so why are we fleeing? And he was pedaling and pedaling, and they came to the town square, and he thought, oh, this is where I used to practice. I used to be in the Hitler Youth, and I used to practice here marching, and we'd play war games in the forest. And he said, this is where we always had farmers markets. And he said, oh, I'm leaving it now. He says, well, I'm not worried. I know Hitler's still going to win this war because Hitler has a secret weapon. He's told us he has a secret weapon that's going to settle things for sure. And as he was riding along, he started singing the song that he used to sing in the Hitler Youth. And the song was, today we rule Germany, tomorrow we rule the world. And he was pedaling and pedaling and pedaling and thinking as well, leaving. He had lots of time to think, and he thought, oh, I left all my toys. I left my electric train set that my dad had given me several years before this. He said, I sure like that. That was the nicest Christmas present I had ever gotten. But he had to leave that. He had, with all of his other clothes, with everything in the house. And it was cold, but he had a good jacket on. And Mom was pedaling. They were going to take the back roads because the main road was full of horse-drawn wagons and army trucks going this way and that way. And so many people just going and going and going. They were fleeing. There was so much confusion. Dieter thought, oh, I can't believe that we are fleeing. Well, their goal was to go 9 miles to grandfather's house. He had a little farm there. And so they pedaled and pedaled and pedaled and pedaled for hours and hours. And by the time evening came, they were at grandfather's house. And Aunt Helen greeted them. She said, oh, come in, come in. She said, are the Russians getting close to Hainau, your town? She says, yes, we can hear them. We can hear the shooting, and we see the planes circling over. And we can see the fighting, the cannons fighting back. And grandfather came in and said, we should really leave tonight. But Aunt Helen and Liesel said, but we're not packed, we're not ready. Because they had a big wagon that was horse-drawn, and they were getting things ready. Jars of fruit, jars of food, and Grandpa was carrying it out to the wagon. And Aunt Helen said, come, I have a lovely supper for us. And so they sat down to eat supper. And Grandfather kept saying, we really should leave tonight. But Aunt Helen and Liesel said, no, we're not ready, we're not packed. And they kept packing and packing after supper. And Grandpa put everything in the wagon. Grandfather said, well, we are going to leave very early in the morning, first thing in the morning. And so the lady said, okay. So they all slept that night. Next morning, early in the morning, Grandfather said, come on, get up, time to go, come on, let's go. And they put all their things, the things that they could take. They had to just leave their house and their furniture and everything. But they could put the things that they needed, the valuable things, in the wagon. And they even put the bicycles in so that Dieter and his mother could ride. And they rode and they rode and they rode. They left. It was very sad to leave their house. Grandfather had to leave his house, and Aunt Helen had to leave her house. And Aunt Helen's husband was off in the war. He was a soldier fighting in the war. And so they left and they started going and going and going. All of a sudden, some Russians' planes flew over and dropped some bombs. And there was a big explosion. And it was a terrible scene. But Dieter wasn't hurt. He was saved. And so was Grandpa, and so was Aunt Helen, and Lisa and Mother. And they gathered their things up. They had to hide First of all, when the plane started coming, he said, hide quickly. And they hid underneath the wagon. And after the planes left, they got back out and they started going again. They were going and going. And all of a sudden, there was a huge explosion. It just shook the ground. And they thought, what is that? And they looked way off in the east. And it was a paper factory that had exploded and burst into flames. And they said, oh dear. And they kept going and kept going and kept going. Well, one evening they were staying at a farmer's house, and grandfather said, I think that we're going to go south to Czechoslovakia. And why don't you come with us, Mother and Dieter? And Mother thought, no, I think that I don't feel good about going to Czechoslovakia. And they discussed it and talked and talked and talked. And finally, grandfather and Aunt Helen and Liesel said, no, we want to go to Czechoslovakia. So they turned and they went south, and he said goodbye to them. And Mother and Dieter kept going on their bicycles. And they kept going and going from one city after another city. Dieter and his mother finally got to Dresden. And they were able to find a place to live there. And that's where they lived. They were refugees. That means they were fleeing from their homes. But the farmers had been really nice to them as they traveled south. And they each had their bicycle. Well, Dieter knew English. He had studied English in school, so he knew German and English. And then the Americans started taking over the western part of Germany. And the Russians moved into the east part of Germany. And then the war was over. And so the Americans on the western side, and since Dieter knew English, he was able to be a translator. That means the Americans didn't know German, but Dieter did, and they could talk to him and he could talk to the Germans. And so he was a translator for the Americans. And do you know what his pay was? 3 meals a day. He ate with the American soldiers, and he thought the food was good, and they were so nice to him. And he was a translator. And then he got a job cleaning, and he would clean and clean, and he was 15 years old. And he liked his job with the Americans. And his mom got a job making lunch for the school children at the school. And so things were going pretty good. And one time he saw the American GIs chewing, just chewing and chewing and chewing. He thought, what are they doing? They just chew and chew and chew, and they don't swallow. He had never heard of gum. They were chewing gum. And one day they gave him a stick of gum. Here, try this. And so he's chewed and chewed and chewed. It was sweet and it was good, but he couldn't swallow it. He kept chewing and chewing. They said, when you get tired of chewing, then you spit it out in the trash over there. Anyway, Dieter liked the Americans, and they were good to him, and he could translate for them. Dieter was fast asleep in his bed, and all of a sudden, something woke him up and was shaking him. And he looked. It was Cliff, the Jeep driver, his friend. He said, Dieter, get up. The officers need you. There's trouble at the border. They need you to translate. Get up and get dressed. Hurry. They're in the Jeep waiting for you. Dieter got up. And he got up, put his pants on, shirt on, grabbed his jacket, and he started running out the door, down the hall, down the steps, because America had taken over this hotel as their headquarters. And he went running. As he ran through the lobby, he looked up at the big clock, and it said 2 o'clock. He thought, 2 o'clock in the night? And there's trouble at the border? It can't wait till tomorrow morning? He says, I don't understand. But he went running out, and there was a Jeep. And Cliff ran around and jumped in the driver's seat. And he said, Dieter, there's a seat right there for you. He jumped in with the 2 officers. And he looked at the officers, and their faces were solemn. they were thinking. They weren't talking, they were thinking. And they were going, and Cliff was driving as fast as he could around this corner and around this corner. They were the only car out on the road. And it was so pitch dark, there wasn't even a moon out in the sky. No stars. And Dieter was thinking, what could be the trouble? What's the problem? The war's over with. So what's the problem? And he was thinking and thinking, and they were going around the corners. And he was thinking and thinking, he thought, well, do you think there's going to be a war between Russia and America? And then every once in a while he'd hear a gun go off. And they kept going, going, going. And the officers were very serious. You thought, what in the world could be the problem? Well, they got closer, and Cliff started slowing down, and they drove up to a little guardhouse, just a little guardhouse. And the guard came out, and he saluted, and the officer jumped out, and he saluted him and went in, and they were talking, talking, talking. And there was a big spotlight shining down on the guardhouse. And then there was a river there, and a bridge, and right on the other side was East Germany, and that's where the Russians were. And then the officer came out and got in the car and started across this little tiny bridge. They didn't even have rails, side rails on the bridge, this tiny little bridge. And the whole time Dieter was sitting there, not saying a word, thinking and thinking. And as they came up to the bridge, halfway across there was a drop bar. And they looked, and Dieter could not believe it. There were 25 Russian soldiers, all lined up with their guns pointing at them, at Dieter and the officers. And it was only two officers, Cliff and Dieter. Dieter didn't have a gun. The officers had guns, but he didn't have a gun. He thought, now what? And then out of the guardhouse came a big Russian soldier with a big fur hat and a star on it. And he came walking towards the Jeep. And Dieter thought, oh, that's a Russian officer. I wonder if he knows German. And he came walking right towards the Jeep. I want to pray. Dearest Lord Jesus, thank you so much for always being with us, taking care of us during the war, during every time. Thank you for taking care of Dieter. We love you, Lord, for Jesus' sake. Amen.